on the nose, shallow. These are words that snobby critics and pedantic movie makers the world over keep in their mouths more than saliva. It's almost like they assume the movie makers didn't put in enough work and therefore they couldn't possibly enjoy the outcome no matter what it is. Clocking how much you think someone worked because you feel they may not have worked as hard as you is super toxic and a topic for a vastly different channel. I digress. Why does everything have to be super layered? Art is subjective. Once it's released, it's not yours anymore. So if you make some point about some obscure topic but wrap it in 17 layers of irresponsible dialogue and or terrible action and people don't find what you hid, it's your fault as a movie maker. Understand, my point isn't that things shouldn't have depth. My point is, depth should be a bonus. The surface level of your work should still be just as enjoyable and able to stand on its own. Everyone doesn't care about your vision, even if you are the director connected to the highest profits in film all time.
See, nobody cares.
I'm speaking specifically to the likes of Martin Scorsese, who once famously or infamously said Marvel movies aren't cinema. Merriam-Webster has two definitions for the word cinema, but we'll get back to Marty in a future video. Sure, there are geeks like me who deep dive into how Sausage Party is an allegory about the ills and potential dangers of organized religion. But there are magnitudes more who just care about being entertained by the animated food being violently killed and having orgies. Nothing is wrong with either fan. And hot take alert, these are the most effective types of movies because they appeal to one side of that coin and it rewards the other side if they decide to give it a chance. Too often movies with a message rely so much on trying to hide said message that they end up not being enjoyable. Yes, I could spend this entire 3 hours deciphering your point, but have you made me want to? I tend to prefer movies with a message that are far less like doing surgery to remove a bone from your finger and more like removing a splinter. Enter Don't Look Up. Don't Look Up is a comedy that could be interpreted by some as a documentary described as a satire. It's a bleak look into the future of people being ignorant, definition and colloquialism, towards science. Spoiler warning for those who may not have seen it and care about that kind of thing. Pause here and come back, or look for the timestamp to fast forward. Okay, since I'm sure that some of you are still here, I won't go into great detail. In this movie, two scientists discover that a comet is on a collision course with the Earth and it is absolutely big enough to end life on the planet. The rub? The vast majority of people don't believe them. They tell the president, who is a female version of a particularly polarizing tangerine-tinged gentleman. Eventually, some people start to take them seriously. A plan comes together to save the Earth after the president agrees to go along in order to distract from a scandal. The mission is going smoothly until she chooses to abort the mission. Why? A billionaire amalgam of your favorite man-child owner of a social media giant and your favorite eccentric spaceship car and crypto enthusiast reckons it is more profitable to mine the comet rather than destroy it. Hilarity ensues. All ends up being lost. What put this movie on my radar? Leonardo DiCaprio, Jonah Hill, Jennifer Lawrence, and Meryl Streep. There are more heavy hitters involved, whether skill-wise, i.e. Cate Blanchett, or name-wise, i.e. Tyler Perry. This was absolutely a star-studded ensemble cast. Per director Adam McKay, this movie came from my burgeoning terror about the climate crisis and the fact that we live in a society that tends to place it as the fourth or fifth news story, or in some cases even deny that it's happening, and how horrifying that is, but at the same time preposterously funny. I started talking to a lot of climate scientists. I kept looking for good news and I never got it. Everything I was hearing was worse than what I was hearing on the mainstream media. So I was talking to David Sirota, and we were both just like, can you believe that this isn't being covered in the media? That it's being pushed to the end of the story? That there's no headlines? And Sirota just offhandedly said, "It's like a comet is heading to Earth and it's going to destroy us all and no one cares." And I was like, that's the idea. Now, generally, reviews were positive, but a few factors pretty much guaranteed there would be those who absolutely hated it. This movie in the post-Trumpian, polarizing year 2022 focused on a topic that had been extremely politicized over the years. That was the original intention. Mind you, filming had taken place after the pandemic started, and tweaks were made while filming was shut down for a time. The only thing that directly affects the whole world that is politicized more than global warming is COVID. The movie not only addressed people who are science deniers, but it didn't hide that fact at all, to the point that the movie is flippant in its portrayal of said people. A lot of the people who are this way about global warming happen to also share a lot of right-wing thoughts. And 2 + 2 is always 4. So let's do the math. You are portraying people with a particular stance that happen to also share stances from a particular political demographic. And the face of it is a president who is a stand-in for a real-life recent president who is a part of the aforementioned demographic. Right-wingers were pissed. Then you have the super technical, "oh, this isn't cinema" crowd. You know those people who will insist that this version...
What law is there to say I got to like you? Do you want to stand up in my face and ask me some damn fool-ass question like that?
Is heads and shoulders above this version.
What law is there to say I got to like you? Want to stand up in my face and ask a damn fool-ass question like that?
Now listen to the way each actor enunciates. Art is subjective, which is my point, but James is trying to thespian pronounce his words while playing a character who is speaking AAVE. If you don't know what that is, educate yourself. This video is already long enough. Denzel is pronouncing his words like a person who is speaking AAVE. Another example of this kind of thing is when Ben Vereen played Will's dad on Fresh Prince.
Being with your mama was the worst mistake I ever made in my life.
Nigga, you better chill the fuck out talking about my mom like that.
Boy, you...
Oops, wrong clip. We'll get to that in a future video though.
You're supposed to be here for him. You get off my back. You think I want this? It just happened.
Now, nothing is inherently wrong here. It's a choice. But in my opinion, they are acting how they were trained and playing a character through that filter versus acting out the character. I digress. The type of people who will say that style is always the correct way are the same people who always pronounce the word theater and look down on those who pronounce it differently. Snobs, if you will. These types are harping on the word satire as defined in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and using that to declare Don't Look Up as a failed satire. Let's break down one such critique from the channel Wisecrack.
As we see it, Don't Look Up, far from perpetuating McKay's legacy as one of our era's foremost satirists, doesn't really hold up to scrutiny. Indeed, we'd argue that it fails to accomplish some of the most basic and important tasks of satire.
Oh, do tell.
So what gives us plebes the right to declare Don't Look Up an unsuccessful satire?
This is a classic, easy way to try and soften any potential backlash by framing yourself as someone whose opinion shouldn't matter while giving it anyway. I actually don't have a problem with this. Sometimes we need a little easy. Let's continue.
The genre is notoriously difficult to define, leaving most scholars to broadly label it as the section of the Venn diagram where good fun meets sharp criticism.
The reason it's difficult to define is because definitions change. Yes, we hate it in general. I used to be incensed at the thought of irregardless and conversate becoming actual words. But language is the tool we use to explain and communicate what happens in society. And as society changes, so should the tools we use to observe it. The problem with this first explanation the speaker here gives is that both the terms good fun and sharp criticism are subjective.
The primary way that satire achieves this, according to scholar Daniel Abrahams, by employing a misrepresentation.
How do they define misrepresentation?
That is, the author needs to identify a real-life problem,
Climate change, COVID, science denial, capitalism.
come up with a way to portray that problem in a grotesque, fabulous, or over-the-top fashion.
A comet hitting towards Earth within a year's time that will literally destroy it on impact.
And then use that metaphorical portrayal to critique and offer insight into the real-life problem.
The characters who understand what's going on literally scream at and insult the people who are denying the science.
However, as Abrahams notes, a work is not satire when there is no implicit criticism in the misrepresentation. And that's where we really get stuck on Don't Look Up.
Okay, so either he missed this on the nose thing, or he wrote this before he actually watched the movie.
See, climate change is inarguably caused by man-made pollution. A comet ricocheting towards Earth, on the other hand, is a big cosmic oops in which mankind is blameless.
Okay, so he just missed the point. The comet coming toward Earth isn't the parallel. The parallel is that after knowing that the comet is coming, the people initially endeavor to do nothing. It is a result through inaction, similar to a lie of omission, and also a direct correlation to ignoring people who are literally paid to do a thing when they tell you they have done that thing and have results that require our attention.
What's more, the solution to the planet-destroying comet doesn't work as a metaphor either. All they have to do is shoot a nuke into the sky to stop the disaster. In contrast, stopping climate change would require a drastic transformation in our lifestyle, particularly for folks in the high-polluting countries.
See, this part isn't supposed to be a metaphor. This is an example of the misrepresentation he alluded to earlier. The idea that the problem could effectively be solved by the push of a button is absurdity at its finest.
Take the film's representation of the president. With no disrespect meant to national treasure Meryl Streep,
You know something that can be taken as disrespect always follows this.
her character is pretty one-dimensional, cravenly obsessed with maintaining power over, say, protecting the planet from total destruction. The president reads as a blatant caricature of a Republican politician with no redeeming qualities.
Here he continues to miscategorize aspects of the film into the wrong part of satire. Let's play a game. The president in Don't Look Up found out about a problem that could be devastating to the planet and downplayed it until something bad happened to her and then took action. The last president of the United States found out about a problem that could be devastating to the planet and downplayed it until something bad happened to him and then took action. Do you think that fits under misrepresentation or a sharp critique of reality?
Denouncing her for the film's presumably mostly liberal audience is a no-brainer. It doesn't actually require any complex thought or questioning of prevailing power structures.
And now we get back to my original point. He is thinking so hard about this that he is missing the point that was laid out right in front of him. Now, I'm actually a fan of that channel. I watch any video they put out that talks about a movie that I'm interested in. The rest of that video goes other places, and maybe it starts to approach a decent point about Don't Look Up's failure as a satire. So don't just take my word for it. Go check it out if you're interested. But notice the idea I'm pushing isn't that we shouldn't think about our art and should just look for it to entertain us. For those of you that do so, I have no issue with that either. I just feel that very similar to my stance on reboots, we should approach each piece of fiction as its own thing and what it is versus what we think it should be. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys later.